The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition. It is July 15th, 2014. And yes, I am live tonight. I have been taking a couple nights off here and there the past week. Last week I took a couple nights off. I don't know if I need to take any off this week. I know in the coming weeks I will be taking a night off here or there. And probably in about a month and a half, 2 months, I'll probably be taking about a week and a half, 2 weeks off. And I'll have a bunch of stuff that I'm putting together to, like pre-recorded broadcast stuff I did off air. Get that ready for you. But I'm also going to have some guest hosts filling in for me for a little bit. Nothing major. I'm moving the headquarters to a new location, and when I finally find the new location and I pick where I'm going to narrow it down, it's going to take a little bit of time to do so, as all of you very well know, because I'm sure you've all moved your headquarters at one point or another. So, since I'm going to be moving from one undisclosed location to another, I am going to need some time to do that. So that's where I will be probably in the next 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months, perhaps even a little bit longer, depending on how long it takes me to find a good location. But when you, if I take off, if you hear a rebroad for a night or something, don't panic. I didn't quit, didn't walk off and disappear into the night, and no, they didn't black bag me, and I'm not in Gitmo. Although, unless you hear otherwise, let me state that, unless you hear otherwise from other sources, then that very well could be the case. But no, anyway, yeah, I've needed, doing this stuff for free. It's a full-time job. 4 nights a week doing a radio show. You end up working about 40, 50 hours a week doing just this, and plus I do all the stuff for YouTube. I try to make my own videos, plus do the archives for the show and the website and everything else. So it does take a lot of time. Anybody that's involved in this type of thing knows exactly what I'm talking about. So sometimes you have to take a night off here or there to go take care of other things. But regardless, I'm here. Have no fear. I haven't left. So anyway, I want to hop on to the first subject tonight, because if everything goes as planned, in hour 2, I will be joined by Tatiana Moroz, who's a singer, musician, and songwriter / I guess she also does like production work behind the scenes, like she helps other musicians, and she's also an activist out there in the liberty freedom community. I'm sure a lot of the listeners know who she is anyway. So if everything goes to plan, Tatiana will be joining us in hour 2. So hour 1, I want to get to my main topic here. I want to tear into it. I'll probably end up getting into this a few other nights too. So, don't think this is just going to be the end-all, be-all, hour-long rant on this. But the slaughter in Gaza has begun again. Operation Wipe the Palestinians from the Map is what it should be called. And this is a rather contentious issue with people. Some people think it's okay. Well, the Jews have to defend themselves. Well, let's not call them the Jews, because not everybody in Israel is a Jew. There are Christians over there too, as well as other denominations. Anyway, Muslim. So, Israel feels attacked, and they respond with 2,000-pound JDAM missiles and whatever else they're lobbing in there. Probably Hellfire missiles. American-made munitions. They get fired at with a little Katyusha rocket, which is these homemade rockets that they fire. They have these homemade rocket launchers. Oh my God, a Hamas rocket launcher. Have you ever seen what a Hamas rocket launcher looks like? Anyone? Really? Really? Has anyone seen what a Hamas rocket launcher really looks like? You're lucky if one really causes any damage, one of those rockets. Besides, they have the Iron Dome, which, by the way, I don't know who makes the Iron Dome. I'm sure it's Raytheon or Boeing or somebody, one of these military contract, probably Raytheon. But whoever made it, they must love the publicity of this battle. Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? But they must love the publicity of the battle, because the term Iron Dome has been used more in the past 2 weeks than I ever heard it mentioned ever. Ever. It works so well. Of course, it's intercepting crappy little Katyusha rockets. It's not like you have an intercontinental ballistic missile coming in. It's like having a multi-billion-dollar anti-missile system versus, rocks being flung from a slingshot. And today, finally, there was an Israeli killed by a rocket. So now Israel can say, well, we have had one person killed, because up till today it was no Israelis killed and hundreds of Palestinians killed. And the Palestinians that are getting killed, most of them are innocent civilians, men, women, and a lot of children. And of course the response is, well, Hamas hides behind human shields. Now, that's kind of contrary to what you see on the ground, because you see a lot of people going to Palestine, activists, whatever you want to call them, human rights protectors, whatever the hell you want to call them, stupid labels, and they're acting as human shields for the people in the Palestinian hospital. So Israel can't bomb them. They're letting the world know, and the world's media know, hey, we're here. Israel's on notice that there's people other than quote-unquote Hamas in these hospitals, and they have to stop bombing them. And of course they say, well, Israel hides weapons of mass destruction in hospitals and mosques and everything else. So collective punishment is what you do. First of all, if they're really hiding that stuff in there, okay, and the government, as Fox News here would have you believe, the Palestinian government is working with Hamas. The Palestinian government was working with Israel to let Israel do these door-to-door raids like a week and a half ago, where they've been arresting people with full cooperation from the Palestinian government. So if, quote-unquote, Hamas was hiding military targets amongst schools and hospitals and near kids because they're cowards, love the lines, by the way. It's the same crap that you would hear. And yes, there were people that did hide amongst insurgents in Iraq that did hide amongst women and children. But anytime innocent people were killed in the invasion of Iraq or even in Afghanistan, it's the same thing. Never any of the fault of the invading force. It's always the fault of the repelling force or the rebels, whatever you want to call them, that they hide amongst the kids. But if that's the case, it doesn't make any sense, because the Israeli government is working with the Palestinian government, the Palestinian Authority, they call themselves, to go in there and take care and do certain raids and arrest certain people. So if you're working with the Palestinian government and you're already doing raids in there, why wouldn't you be able to do raids at these places where they might have munitions and stuff stored and send in like one of your special ops teams or a Mossad hit team that could get in there and take care of things and not kill the people around it, not have any type of collateral damage. So it's not, there are options that you have. Well, that would put our men at danger. Well, that's their job, isn't it? To defend the motherland or whatever you guys call Israel, right? Isn't that their whole job? Their definition of being is to, we're the special forces, we're the special operatives, we're that thin line, right? So why wouldn't you send them in? You do it quietly. Kill if it was just Hamas guys, you could kill all the Hamas guys without anybody else that's faithful to them knowing. And by the way, the general populace, most of the people in Gaza don't like the general civilians, the regular people. They're not really, oh yeah, we love Hamas. No, they're probably more inclined to join Hamas now, since their government's working with Israel to a certain extent to allow them to come in and arrest people. That creates a division between the people and their government, and when there's that division, who do you think is going to come in and fill that vacuum? And you don't think the Israelis know that? You don't think Mossad knows that? You don't think Shin Bet knows that? You don't think all these little cutesy, agencies, their versions of what we have over here, you don't think they all have this capability of thinking about this? If I'm sitting here talking to you about it, I'm sure somebody on their team has thought about it at least once, okay? I don't think I'm smarter than the entire group that works for Mossad and the Shin Bet and the Israeli intelligence and the IDF. I know that they're collectively, there's a lot of intelligent people that work there. Whether I agree with their ideology or not, there are collectively intelligent enough people there that they would have had the same collective thought and understand what they're doing, okay? And understand the outcome of it. But our media doesn't even let the dumbed-down Americans even know that stuff. No, the dumbed-down Americans are told that the Palestinian government is working with Hamas and that they want to, it's death to all Jews and blah, 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 blah. And they were in on the kidnapping of these 3 teenagers because that's what supposedly sparked this whole thing, was the kidnapping of a bunch of teenagers, right? Now, I've been saying for a while now, since probably about a week and a half. And I even said it beforehand, okay, before I had confirmation of this. Probably actually even longer ago, because it's been over 2 weeks. So we'll say even before they started going into Gaza, probably I lose track of time. So we'll say like 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago, you can go back and listen to the older shows. And I talked about this, that, when I brought up the 3 Israeli teenagers, I said they're going to use this as an excuse, as did others. And I just said, and this was before they found them dead. I said, I have this nagging feeling that they did it, that somehow Israel, the government itself, not the people, but the government itself or a faction thereof, like Benjamin Netanyahu's friggin' little gang of psychos, somebody came up with the idea of kidnapping these kids and killing them. And then they could blame it on Hamas and use it as a justification, right? Almost like a false flag type event. Well, that might have sounded crazy to some people. And in fact, I said this to a few people I know off air, some, family members and other people I know, like outside of radio friends. And a lot of them thought I was insane, and they were like, why would they do that? And people are appalled when I think like that because, as I've told you a bazillion times, my grandmother and my mother were Jewish, more so my grandmother, and my grandmother was in a concentration camp in World War II. And she had her face bit in by a Nazi soldier because she refused to watch the execution of another Jew. So I get flack because I don't blatantly just support Israel, but I have a problem supporting a country and a government that is currently doing the same things that the Nazis did to the people that they rounded up, including the Jews, the Czechs, the Poles, everybody, political dissidents, their own people, all these people. The same thing that the Nazis did all across Europe are the same things that they're doing on a collective, smaller level to the people in Gaza. So I can't get behind the excuse of, well, we're preventing another Holocaust from happening by doing what we do throughout the Middle East. No, you're not. And I'm really tired of using what my grandmother and those people in her generation went through, and not just the Jews. I mean, if even if you, like some people don't like the numbers, even if you believe the official numbers, if you believe 6 million Jews, that's fine. I don't have a problem believing that. But there was something like 21 or 22 million people in the camps. So they only made up like maybe a fifth, maybe a little more than a fifth, maybe a little less than a quarter of the overall people that were in the camps. So let's not forget that little fact. But I don't want you using even that small, even if it's only a quarter of them, I don't want you using what that group of individuals plus all these other people in the camps went through as a political cover for wanton slaughter, because that's what's going on. I mean, I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos that come out of Palestine every time one of these operations goes on. I've seen pictures that come out of all these other countries where we back rebels and all this stuff, and you see horrific things. But the stuff I see coming out of Palestine is just absolutely abhorrent, and you can't justify backing a country that's blowing. I can't back anyone. No political ideology, government, group, anything. I can't back any of them that are willing to just kill children indiscriminately because, well, they're less than we are. Okay, and I've already gone into how American politicians suck. Okay. But I want to play a piece of audio really quick before I get too far away from it, because I was talking about the Israeli teenagers. I'm going to play this clip. It's from the Real News Network. Okay, it's on YouTube. You can go find it. It's titled "Israeli Government and Press Knew Teenagers Were Dead for Weeks." It's also, I have it posted on federaljack.com. I'm going to play this for you because it's important for you to hear this quick interview. It's about 7.5, 8 minutes from this correspondent that they have in the Middle East. And I want you to hear what she says. Listen what she says. She lays the whole case out for you, and she gives you the evidence that these did not. She doesn't say that they kidnapped them. Okay, now I'll get into that a little bit more later, but she lays the case out how they knew about these Israeli teens being dead for 2 weeks, and so did the press, and they both kept it silent until the government was ready to release it, and that's when they were, after emotions for 2 weeks and everything had been amped up, now they get the people's backing to do another invasion of Gaza. Remember, any intelligent leader, whether they're evil or not, knows that if you want to go to war and you want to be successful and be able to fight the war and not have to fight another war on the home front with your own people, whether it be, vocally or maybe even having them rise up, you need to have the people at home to back you to go to war. So what better way to do that than to manipulate emotions, just like they did with us on 9/11? Perhaps paying attention to history is important, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, let me play this audio clip from the Real News Network really quick for you. Check this out.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Anton Warrenchuk in Baltimore. The bodies of 3 Israeli teenagers who disappeared more than 2 weeks ago were found in the occupied Palestinian West Bank. Here to give us an update from Jaffa, Israel, is Leah Terechansky. She is a Real News correspondent reporting from Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories. She is also the director of the documentary On the Side of the Road. Thanks for joining us, Leah.
Thanks so much for having me, Anton.
So talk about the latest news that the 3 Israeli teenagers were found dead and what response we are likely to see from Israel in the next few days.
So 2 very significant things happened today. The first of which is that the government finally lifted the gag order on the Israeli press to reveal that the teenagers that they've been reporting for the last 2 weeks were kidnapped were actually dead. This is something that the government started leaking to the press almost immediately after the operation began on the 3rd day, but forbade the Israeli press from publishing it. Of course, without them publishing it, the foreign press couldn't confirm it. The second thing that happened today that was very important is that while all the turmoil is going on with the bodies of the 3 teenagers, which the government claims were found today, and of course the 2 weeks of bombardments of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli parliament passed a law today that would further entrench the Israeli occupation in East Jerusalem, making the division of Jerusalem in any future 2-state agreement impossible.
Okay, and in regards to the Israeli teens, has anyone thus far claimed responsibility?
No one has claimed responsibility. From the beginning, no one has claimed responsibility. Meanwhile, the Israeli government, and especially the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, have insisted that it's actually the fault of Hamas. Now, this is very important because at every single point where he appeared into the press and in public spheres, he insisted almost in the same sentence that while the teenagers were indeed kidnapped, maintaining the line, they were kidnapped by Hamas. Meanwhile, when we compare this to every other incident that I've at least covered in my 5 years here, and speaking to many veteran journalists, if the government actually has evidence and if they want to push forward a line, they almost immediately after the incident release the evidence. Oftentimes the evidence, is not truthful, and we at The Real News have often proven that. But still, they immediately, after a claim, release the evidence. Here, they didn't release the evidence, not immediately, not after, and not even now. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister continued to say that this is the fault of Hamas. Now, Hamas itself, as a party, didn't take responsibility for this. Not one of the many branches of Hamas, including the militant branches of Hamas, the Qassam brigades, didn't take responsibility for it. Neither did the usual suspects, the Wahhabis and the Islamic Jihad, nor did the Fatah's militant wing, Al-Aqsa. So as far as we know, none of the militant groups of the Palestinians have taken responsibility for it, but the Hamas party refused to condemn it. In fact, they've actually said that whoever did this, should be celebrated, which is what we would expect from a party that never gave up armed struggle. Fatah, on the other hand, the Palestinian party that's in charge of the Palestinian Authority, led by Mahmoud Abbas, has condemned the kidnapping almost on the second day of after the incident, but failed to condemn the Israeli government and the Israeli military's numerous attacks on the Hamas party, including the arrest of more than 500 people in the last 2 weeks, the breaking into of 2,100 homes, the destruction of many of those homes, and the issuing of more than 100 administrative detention orders to Hamas members. Now, today, the Israeli Prime Minister issued the following statement in the press. Immediately after the abduction, we said that Hamas was responsible. I think that it is now clear to everyone what we based ourselves. Abu Mazen, which is Mahmoud Abbas, says that he opposes abductions. He says that he wants to proceed on the path to peace. If he stands by what he says, there's only one way to advance peace, and that is to tear up his agreement with Hamas. And this exactly is what this whole operation is about. The unity between Fatah and Hamas brought the latest in a series of political embarrassments to the Israeli Prime Minister. And he was adamant to break the unity between the two rivaling Palestinian political parties. Now, it looks like the rage on the streets, on the Palestinian streets in the West Bank, as we've covered last week, has turned against the PA. And the Israeli government and the Israeli military at the same time have been crippling the Hamas party. So we're seeing here, both externally and internally, a rift between the two parties, which will likely lead to the end of the unity.
Okay, and just to remind our viewers, have Palestinians been responding to the way the Palestinian Authority handled the crisis, considering the weeks of raids that the IDF conducted throughout the West Bank?
Yeah, so yesterday, former minister of the Palestinian Authority had stones and shoes thrown at him at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. We've seen the protests on the streets of the West Bank and Gaza against the way the Palestinian Authority has handled the situation. And as we reported last week, in the Jenin refugee camp in the northern West Bank, one group, the Al-Aqsa Brigade most likely, has actually opened fire on a PA security chief. And everyone I've been speaking to in my time in the West Bank has said that the rage against the Palestinian Authority has really reached unprecedented levels.
Okay, and do you think that Israel is going to intensify its military actions in Gaza?
We'll see. I just want to remind our audience that the rage is actually about the PA's coordination with the Israeli army. So all the while the Israeli army has been breaking into hundreds and thousands of homes, most of whom belong to Hamas party members, but also many others. For example, in the...
Just so you know, when you hear them saying PA, that's Palestinian Authority. That's the current government, and the one governing side. And then you have Hamas, which is actually, they won the popular election and everything, which is now it's also considered a political party. Anyway, when you hear them say PA, they're talking about Palestinian Authority. So it's like they're pissed with the local government for working with the Israelis. That's where the rage is coming from. Anyway, back to the correspondent.
Refugee camps around Nablus. Anyone who spent any time in Israeli jails, which is 40% of the Palestinian males, for any reason at all, had their house broken into. Oftentimes they were beaten for no reason, sometimes beaten into a critical condition. And they just went door to door to door to anybody who's ever spent any time in jail. And all this time, the Palestinian Authority, of course from pressure from the United States, has been coordinating with the Israeli army. And this is one of the main reasons why there's a lot of rage against them. Now, another very curious thing about this whole incident is if indeed the teenagers were kidnapped and killed or killed while trying to get kidnapped, why is the Israeli government bombarding Gaza for the last 2 weeks? Yesterday, they killed a senior official in the Hamas party, and as a result, for the first time since November 2012, since the last war we had here, the Hamas party launched a rocket against southern Israel. So we're seeing here that there's a very intentional campaign of agitation. There was one soldier who leaked to the Orthodox paper, the Chadrei Charedim, that there was actually snipers in the Jenin refugee camp who were trying to shoot people to instigate stone throwing. So we're seeing that the government is intentionally trying to instigate a third intifada, which will then legitimize a very wide violent campaign against the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Okay, Leah Tarachansky coming to us from Jaffa, Israel. Thanks for that update.
Thanks for having me, Anton.
So there you go. You can go look it up and watch the video over on federaljack.com. It's titled, again, Israeli government and press knew teenagers were dead for weeks. It's up on federaljack.com under the Israel, Middle East, Palestine, and Gaza section, which there are all like 4 different sections there. But go watch the video. Go do your homework. Look up what Zionism is. We'll get into that on the other side. It's political ideology. Fascist in nature. You can't support what they're doing to these people. Sorry, it's an open-air concentration camp, and they're just bombing them like fish in a barrel. We'll be right back. It's inhumane. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, do you think that it's proportionate that if a, homemade, in most cases, these homemade rockets, it's not like they're getting arms shipments in from Iran. These homemade rockets, they do land. And yeah, I'm sure some weapons do get in there from outside sources here or there, but it's not like they're getting JDAMs and they're lobbing these things from their own Palestinian Air Force. Let's be real. And when I was talking about their rocket launchers before, they look like they took perhaps old Soviet rocket launcher tubes, or even manufactured their own, which is we've seen done before. It wouldn't be a first time. And it's pretty much a technical. All my military friends out there know exactly what I'm talking about when I say a technical. I mean, it's a pickup truck with a wannabe piece of artillery mounted in the bed. I mean, that's how big the rocket tubes are. And yeah, one of them supposedly hit a gas station, caused the fire. A lady got burned up in her car. I don't know if apparently that's not that might be the one that died. But I mean, they're small little rockets. I mean, versus what they're getting hit with, it's disproportionate. It's completely disproportionate. And as faithful to, her religion as my grandmother was, I think she's rolling over in her grave. I think she's cremated, so it's kind of impossible technically, but it's a joke. But she'd be rolling over in her grave if she saw what was being done to these little kids in her name. It's disgusting. I don't care if they're Arab kids. I don't care if they're little Israeli kids, American kids, African kids, Arab kids. Like I said, it doesn't matter to me. They're children. In fact, we're all humans. I don't care what color your skin is, where you're from, if you got polka dots, or what you smell like. I really don't care. I mean, well, okay, maybe the smell thing. Haha, it's another joke, trying to lighten the mood a little bit. But seriously, I don't care. We're all human, and your children are just as equal as my children and my friends' children. Just because, what I saw Peter King say the other day on TV, that IRA piece of crap. A terrorist coming on TV and having the balls to call other people terrorists. Really? There's a little saying, Pete. It's called "Those in glass houses should not throw stones." Perhaps you should go recite that a few times. Maybe it'll stick inside your head. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up Representative Peter King loves the IRA, or just Peter King IRA. And you'll see there's all sorts of information out there about his connections to it. Dirtbag. And he said that the death of an Israeli, or excuse me, the death of a Palestinian child doesn't equate to the death of an Israeli child. Excuse me? Did you just actually show your evil on air, sir? Did you really just say that, sir? And I played this on air last week. You can go look it up. Just look up Peter King. It's on Mox News' YouTube channel. Just look up Peter King. It's I think he titled it. I'm trying to remember what Mox titled it. It's what did he title it? Yeah, I think it's the death of a Palestinian or the death of an Arab child doesn't equate to the death of an Israeli child. Just look that up on YouTube. I'm sure someone's got the video. You'll see a clip. And there's Peter King last week, and I believe it was MSNBC. MSNBC spew. Bleh. That's what you want to do when you turn on that channel. That's why I don't watch it. Ugh, I don't watch any of mainstream media because I just want to scream and strangle the presenters. Anyway, and no, I really don't mean I want to. Well, maybe kind of. Anyway, he comes on and he said that I don't really think that the death of a Palestinian child equates to the death of an Israeli. And then he kind of stopped himself from finishing. He said it doesn't equate. But you get what he's saying. He's a disgusting Zionist. And by the way, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. Zionism is an ideology. You can call it a political belief if you want. It would fit. It's not about getting the Jews home. So technically, according to Jewish right, I'm a Jew because my mother and my grandmother were Jews. Now, I'm not a practicing Jew. I've never been to Jewish school, or I'm not a good little Jewish boy. I never went and did the yarmulke thing or had any of the bar mitzvah or any of that thing. All right? Never went to temple. I was actually raised Christian. But I'll be damned if I'm going to support or let you use, and when I say you, I mean the supporters of this. I'll be damned if I'm going to let you use the past and what happened as an excuse. And it fuels my fire. I mean, as a human, I'm pissed off, but that fuels my fire even more. How dare you? How dare you? And again, it wasn't just the Jews that were rounded up. There's a lot more to it. There were more people that were, that's a whole side issue in and of itself. But you can't use that as an excuse, and you can't use rocket fire coming in. Well, we get hit by Katyusha rockets every once in a while. Okay. So I guess if you look at it that way, let's try to look at it in from their point of view. Let's put ourselves in their shoes for a second. The Palestinians, the people that live there. Let's put ourselves in their shoes for a minute. Why would they want to fire rockets back at Israel? Because they hate the Jews, Popeye. They're anti-Semitic. I hate to break the news to you, but Arabs are Semites, so it's pretty hard to be anti-Semitic if you're a Semite. I'm just saying. That's just another thing that's thrown around out there, pop culture term now over here. People they'll repeat it. You hate Jews, you anti-Semite. You don't even know what you're talking about. Shut your trap. Zip it. You have no idea what you're spewing. Stop spewing ADL-sponsored garbage and shut your mouth. Should I say APAC-sponsored and ADL-pushed garbage? That's, by the way, those are the same groups that push the people that I'm convinced that the hardcore, the Jews did everything groups are funded by AIPAC and pushed, and helped and prodded and controlled by, people in the ADL and other little groups that are connected. And that's to muddy the water. So if you have a problem with what Israel is doing, then you're called an anti-Semite or a rabid Jew hater. And, oh, look what you're into. You must blah. See, this is an issue that they'd rather not have talked about. So they muddy the waters and get people to go, I don't want to talk about it. Have to be a good person. Cannot talk about it at all. Wouldn't want anybody to know. And our media, did you see what Diane Sawyer did last week? Diane Sawyer had the balls, and of course they do it, and even if they get caught, it's still it's all about the original presentation. That idea is still out there. And their apology and them getting caught is put on the back page. Diane Sawyer, and of course everybody made excuses for them too. Oh, I'm sure they didn't do it on purpose. But they were on TV, and she was talking about a quote-unquote rocket attack from Gaza into Israel. And, oh, my God, look what happened. Look at the aftermath. And you can go see it on YouTube. She shows the pictures of a Palestinian home that was hit by an Israeli airstrike. Huge difference between a Katyusha rocket and a 2,000-pound JDAM, okay? A Katyusha rocket fits in a tube. It's probably maybe 10 to 12 inches in diameter at the most, one of these tubes. I'll say between like 8 and 12, like 8 and 12 inches in diameter, each one of these tubes that they fire these little homemade rockets from. Some of these launchers they have, you'd think they were firing mortars, and it looks like they're firing friggin' fireworks. The people in Gaza, towards Israel. Come on, guys. It's like me taking my 4th of July fireworks and you guys using a $1 billion missile defense system to take it out. Really? Really? Talk about a moneymaker. Again, Raytheon or whoever, I don't know who made it. If it's Raytheon, it wouldn't surprise me. But whoever made the Iron Dome, again, nice PR. Don't even get me started. Anyway, compare that to a 2,000-pound JDAM. Just compare the munitions. It's not a fair fight. So if we already know it's not a fair fight, Israel has what I think the 5th largest army in the world. They have nukes. These people have rocks. What do you constantly see the teenagers throwing at when they are pissed off, the Palestinian kids throwing at the Israeli soldiers in the IDF? Rocks. They're not chucking hand grenades. They're throwing rocks. Rocks. They're not throwing munitions at them. Well, Hamas is waiting. Well, then they're in full-on gear, full battle rattle. They got machine guns. They got rocket launchers. They can fight back. They can fire back. It would be more of a fair fight. These kids have rocks. And you know what? I don't want to hear that, again, they have a right to defend themselves. Come on. Really? You don't use your brain a little bit. You don't think some of this is instigated? You heard the Real News Network clip where you heard her presenting evidence that some of this stuff was instigated. And even if it wasn't, when I say instigated, I should say it has to be broken down into two things. There's instigating a fight, like picking a fight with someone and getting them so emotionally charged that eventually they're going to just swing at you, and then you're like, ha, now I can use self-defense. Like, I haven't done that before. When I was younger, that's how I used to get people to take a swing at me if I wanted to knock them out and be able to get self-defense. You think I was stupid? Right? I used to goad people in the fights and get them to take a swing at me. I would dodge the first punch and then knock their asses out and end it. So if I can do that on a personal level with, a one-on-one individual level, and you all know, anybody that's ever been in a fight knows what I'm talking about, you don't think nations do that? They do. So Israel knows they're going to piss these people off enough to fire a couple rockets back. I mean, you can only push an oppressed people so far. Didn't some of the oppressed Jews fight back in World War II? And some of the oppressed other people? I know my grandfather did. He was living in occupied Holland. He couldn't have been more than 18, 19 years old. He was working on board a ship. Back then, they didn't have the big rubber bumpers on ships that they have now. And they had guys that stood on the bow and up on the fantail, and they were like big Q-tips, and they would poles, and they would push the ships away from the dock. They had shifts. Well, when a Nazi soldier would come by, they'd knock him in the head, knock him unconscious, and then push him in the water with the stick and hold him underwater until he drowned. Yeah, they did round up people that were non-Jews, just regular Dutch citizens, and they would execute them in the streets as a way of retribution for doing such things. But did my grandfather and his fellow shipmates and the other people that took part in the resistance efforts during World War II, did they stop? No. They killed more Nazi soldiers. The more innocents that they killed, the more Nazi soldiers they killed. Oh, look, a cycle of violence. Do I see anything of the sort here? Oh, maybe we should learn from it. What did I say before about revolutions? The other day I was talking about this last week. I was talking about in terms of here, and I said we don't need a revolution, right? And that's kind of what you see going on over there, this cycle of violence, right? A revolution is a cycle. Well, that's what they're in, a cycle. And I said if we want to break free and not have a bloody revolution, we need to think outside the box, right? We need to solve a problem with a different level of thinking than the level that created it. What did Einstein say? His exact quote is, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. Well, that's what we're doing. You slung a slingshot ball at me. Bring in the nuke. I mean, and they've got their own people convinced, a large portion of them, that, it's cool to be fascist. We should just go in and wipe them all off the planet. It's absolutely disgusting. It's abhorrent, okay? I don't care. Look, if they're firing back at you, it's because they're oppressed. And nothing for nothing, but we took their land, okay? They were living there, and, the British and the Americans, and a few other people, but the British and the Americans mostly got together, and we pretty much took their land and gave it to the Israelis to create Israel, okay? And there was a lot of things. Go look up the bombing of the King David Hotel. That was actually done by, I think it was Rahm Emanuel's father was connected to the Irgun terror. Well, he was an Irgun terrorist, but they were the people that bombed. To a large part, Israel was almost bombed into existence by fanatical terrorists. Interesting. Anyway, you have people that are oppressed and feeling oppressed. You can't expect that you're going to bomb the hell out of them and solve the problem. This is a cycle of violence that keeps happening. So either you sit down and we have a political solution to this and you start treating them like fellow equal human beings, or you just drop the pretense of that you care about them as human beings and admit that it's genocide and wipe them completely off the map and show the world your real hand, which is what they want to do. But they don't want to have the bad face on it. So the powers that shouldn't be over there would rather rely on, it's for the self-defense, me. No, you know what? If you're going to do wanton slaughter and just full-on genocide, then do it, but own it. It's that simple. Now I'm going to play an audio clip from Storm Cloud's Gathering. I'm sure you guys know who Storm Cloud's Gathering is. I've played audio clips from their YouTube channel before. Great YouTube channel. They put a good piece together about the Palestinian conflict, or the Israeli slaughter of the Palestinians over there right now. And I want to let it play before we go into break. So here we go. Check it out.
On July 7th, 2014, Israel began a massive assault in the Gaza Strip, Palestine. In the first week alone, Israel dropped over 400 tons of bombs, killing over 130 Palestinians. The majority were civilians, and about half of them were women and children. By the time you're watching this, the number will be higher. Israel's official justification for this wholesale slaughter: the murder of 3 Israeli teenagers, which Israel blames on Hamas. That's not the real reason. First of all, Israel has not produced one single piece of evidence implicating Hamas or even a Palestinian in the murders. And in fact, the evidence that we do have indicates that the murderers were Israeli. You see, on Tuesday, July 1st, the Jerusalem Post released the audio of the kidnapped teens' distress call to the police. And in that call, the kidnappers can be heard telling the boys to put their head down in Hebrew. According to the Jerusalem Post, prior to being leaked to the public, this audio was being held under a gag order by the Israeli government. So why is Israel really attacking Gaza? It's not about self-defense. It's obviously not about avenging those 3 teenagers. Those are just cover stories for the naive. What this is really about is natural gas. It turns out that Gaza has quite a bit of natural gas on its coastline, one of the largest sources in the region. British Gas, which holds a joint exploration agreement for the area, estimates that the fields hold at least 1 trillion cubic feet of gas. That gas belongs to the Palestinian people, and they should be the ones to benefit from it. Israel disagrees. After the death of Yasser Arafat, under questionable circumstances, Israel has controlled those fields, and British Gas has negotiated with Tel Aviv. With power divided between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, the Palestinians have been too weak to put up any meaningful resistance, and Israel would like to keep it that way. The unity government between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority threatens Israel's control of those fields, and as such, it has to be destroyed. It's pretty basic, really. These are the motives of all wars: resources, territory, and power. You'll always come up with an excuse, and it's easy to fall for them if you don't do your research. But there's also a really easy way to avoid getting duped. Always stand against wars of aggression. Period. Make it a matter of principle, and the facts and morality will always end up being on your side. Speaking of morality, even if those teenagers had been killed by Hamas, what kind of psychopath thinks that this gives Israel the right to go and kill over 100 people who had nothing to do with it? We're talking about little kids here. Listen, I'm not going to show you pictures of the dead or dying children in this video, but I've gone and looked at them. And as a father, it's almost unbearable to see something like that. If hearing about those bombs falling doesn't faze you emotionally, this is just a political debate for you, then go look at the pictures. You have no right to defend what Israel is doing if you don't have the courage to even glance at the consequences. And anyone who would justify these crimes after seeing the civilian casualties should be ashamed of themselves. The bombing of heavily populated residential areas is a war crime, and the U.S. government is funding it with your tax dollars. That's right, Israel receives over $3 billion in foreign aid from the U.S. each year. Of course, it's no accident that you've never had to face what's being done to the Palestinians in your name. If you turn on the mainstream media at any point during this crisis, all you'll see is a constant stream of reports focusing on the Palestinian rockets being fired in response. These reports conveniently fail to mention that as of yet, these primitive rockets have not killed one single Israeli. The Obama administration is also running with this artificial narrative.
We strongly condemn the continuing rocket fire into Israel and the deliberate targeting of civilians by terrorist organizations in Gaza. No country can accept rocket fire aimed at civilians, and we support Israel's right to defend itself against these vicious attacks.
But the rockets. Let's all bring this back to the puny homemade rockets that the Palestinians are launching out of desperation. Yeah, let's talk about that. Pretend for a moment that this wasn't happening in the Middle East, but rather in the southwest of the United States. Hey, just for kicks, let's say it was happening in Palestine, Texas. So 3 teenagers from Mexico are visiting Palestine, Texas, and they get killed. By somebody. We don't know who. Mexico, of course, takes this as an invitation to launch airstrikes on the entire region. For 10 days, the Mexican Air Force dutifully pummels Palestine, Texas, and the surrounding villages, but unfortunately, these darn rednecks were unaware that this was perfectly within Mexico's rights. So they started taking pot shots at the Mexican fighter jets with shotguns and deer rifles, and some started shooting in the general direction of the Mexican border. The bullets didn't reach their targets, but they still tried to defend themselves, and that is unacceptable. Sound absurd? That's what you people sound like when you parrot the mainstream media and these talk show pundits without thinking. Totally incoherent. Israel isn't defending itself against the Palestinians any more than the Europeans were defending themselves against the natives of the Americas. Year after year, the Israelis have taken more Palestinian land, bulldozed more homes, set up new settlements, and systematically expelled the inhabitants. You can make up justifications or deny it all you want. The maps don't lie. Of course, there are those who are actually okay with what these maps tell us. There are people who like to assert that Israel has the right to steal every inch of Palestinian land, because supposedly 1,500 or so years ago, their Jewish ancestors were expelled. They call this the right of return. Okay, let's run with that. Let's take the right of return as a given. Rights are an interesting topic. The thing about rights is that if a human right actually exists, then it would have to be universal to all of humanity. So what about the Palestinians' right of return? Don't you find it a bit odd that one of the primary stipulations that Israel always imposes upon the Palestinians during negotiations is that in order to reach a peace agreement, Palestinians would have to accept that they have no right to return to the land that was taken from them over the past 50 years? We're not talking about people who have some kind of abstract ancestral claim. These are the actual people who lost their homes and their farms and their businesses in this lifetime. So is the right of return an actual right or not? You can't have it both ways without exposing the dirty underbelly of this issue, which is that Zionism is a fundamentally racist and fascistic ideology. And no, Zionism is not inseparable from Judaism, and it has nothing to do with who you are genetically.
You know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
By the way, that was Joe Biden. Just go on YouTube and type in Joe Biden, I'm a Zionist.
So what can we do to help the Palestinians? You can start by actively engaging this debate everywhere it comes up. Don't avoid the conversation just to be polite. Women and children are being massacred right now in Gaza. And silence in the face of oppression is to take the side of the oppressors. It's time to start confronting those who support what Israel is doing right now. This isn't a matter of opinion, preference. To defend the use of the military against civilian populations is shameful, it's immoral, and it has consequences. A particular weight of responsibility sits on the shoulders of those in the so-called conservative churches in the U.S. Because this is where the bulk of the support for Israel is found. It's up to you who see what's really going on to wake people up in your church. If the pastor in your church defends the bombardment of Gaza, or any war for that matter, you need to confront him. And if he doesn't respond when you confront him in private, you need to confront him publicly. If that sounds extreme to you, then go look at those pictures of the little kids who are on the receiving end of this. Seriously, go take a glimpse. But understand that the horror of seeing a photo of a dismembered child is nothing like what their parents are feeling. And to the people of Israel, you need to do some serious soul searching. Is this the image you want the world to have when they think of Israel? An image of a brutal oppressor that murders civilians without hesitation? But more importantly, is this what you want to be?
We want to see it in our own eyes, not from television point of view. They chose Hamas to rule them. It's their fault. They got it to where it is now, not us.
But don't you think it'll get worse by bombing them?
No, I think that's the only solution. I think they should just clear off all the city. Just take it off the ground. Yes, I'm a little bit fascist.
If you want to keep informed about what's going on in the world, go to our website, scgnews.com, and sign up for email updates.
I suggest you check out Storm Clouds Gathering on YouTube and their website. They do great work. That's why I gave them the last few minutes of the segment. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back in 3 minutes. You cannot support the madness that is going on over there with any sort of logic. I don't care what your argument is. It's invalid. They're killing innocent people and children. Argument over. Needs to stop. We'll be right back.